Criminal procedure constantly tests the boundary between two opposing forces: the state's mandate to maintain societal security and the individual's right to walk free. To regulate this tension in India, the statutory framework relies on the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023, or the BNSS. The entire foundation of this code is anchored to Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, which guarantees that no person shall be deprived of their life or personal liberty except according to procedure established by law. Because stripping a citizen of their liberty is the most severe action a state can take before a conviction, the law of bail acts as the operational algorithm to negotiate this extreme boundary. The BNSS categorizes all crimes using a strict binary system. Under Section 2C, the law relies directly on its first schedule to classify every offense into one of two distinct categories. This decision tree maps out that fundamental division. Based on the offense, an accused person is routed either down the green path, governed by Section 478 for bailable offenses, or the red path, governed by Section 480 for non-bailable offenses. For minor crimes like simple hurt or defamation, Section 478 applies. Here, the accused has an absolute statutory right to bail. The police or the court must release them once a bail bond is furnished. Refusal is impermissible. But if the offense involves serious crimes like murder or kidnapping, Section 480 takes over. The automatic right to release hits a hard stop. Freedom is no longer guaranteed. It relies entirely on the court's evaluation of the case. This division also dictates police authority. In a bailable offense, the police officer at the station has the power to grant bail directly. In serious, non-bailable cases, that power is removed from law enforcement entirely. Because Section 480 removes the statutory guarantee of liberty, the burden of preventing unjust incarceration falls heavily on the judiciary, relying entirely on how judges exercise their discretion. If bail is not a right in non-bailable offenses, we have to ask, what stops a single judge's discretion from becoming an arbitrary denial of freedom? The answer to this question lies with the Supreme Court of India, which has spent decades engineering a framework of binding guidelines to strictly regulate how trial courts wield this discretionary power. The modern philosophy of Indian bail law was firmly established in the landmark case of State of Rajasthan v. Balchand. In this ruling, the court introduced a concise legal doctrine that would govern all future decisions. Bail is the rule and jail is the exception. This principle is derived directly from the presumption of innocence. Since an accused person is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a trial, unnecessary pretrial detention violates their constitutional rights. The Balchand principle establishes the default operational setting for judges. The burden is not on the accused to prove they deserve freedom. The state must actively prove why releasing them poses a specific, justifiable danger. To give trial judges specific metrics for that evaluation, Justice Krishna Iyer laid out practical parameters in the Gudakanti Narsamhulu v. Public Prosecutor judgment. He noted early in the judgment that social security and personal liberty must be balanced, and that poverty should never act as a barrier to securing pretrial release. We can visualize this evaluative process as a balancing scale. First, the judge measures the gravity of the crime by dropping the nature of the accusation and the severity of the potential punishment onto the scale. To counter that, the judge must assess the actual risk of releasing the individual. They look for the possibility of the accused fleeing justice, intimidating witnesses, or tampering with evidence. This balancing act forms the operational matrix. A judge must identify a high probability of these specific risks occurring to legally justify overriding the default rule of granting bail. When courts fail to apply these metrics correctly, individuals enter the system as undertrials, trapped behind bars for years without a conviction. The Supreme Court addressed the systemic failure in Husainarada Khatun v. State of Bihar, a case that exposed the mass, prolonged incarceration of under-trial prisoners awaiting hearings for minor offenses. The court ruled that the right to a speedy trial is implicit under Article 21. Holding someone in indefinite detention while they await their day in court is a direct violation of their constitutional liberty. Years later, in Sanjay Chandra v. CBI, the Supreme Court confronted a persistent misconception frequently held by investigating agencies and lower courts regarding why we detain people in the first place. The ruling clarified that pretrial detention should not be utilized as a mechanism for advance punishment. The singular, legitimate legal objective of denying bail and detaining an accused person is to secure their appearance at the trial. Incarcerating individuals indefinitely before the state has proven its case transforms a procedural safety measure into a premature, unconstitutional penalty. To enforce these rights structurally, the judiciary had to attack the problem at the source, the moment of arrest. The judgment in Arnish Kumar v. State of Bihar responded oppressively to police making mechanical and unjustified arrests. This conceptual funnel illustrates the filter imposed by the court. For offenses punishable by up to 7 years in prison, police are now restricted from making automatic arrests. Law enforcement must clearly justify the specific need to detain the suspect. If they cannot, they must ordinarily issue a notice of appearance, requiring the accused to cooperate without being thrown in a cell. This push for structural compliance culminated recently in Satender Kumar Until v. CBI, which laid down a comprehensive, modern framework for rationalizing how bail is processed across the country. The Until guidelines were driven by the realities of complex federal and economic investigations, where trials take years to conclude and the risk of prolonged under-trial detention is extremely high. To manage this, the Supreme Court classified criminal offenses into distinct categories. This system organizes how courts handle bail applications, creating a rational structure to ensure decisions are made promptly rather than letting applications languish. These modern judgments operate as procedural force multipliers. They mandate that magistrates actively scrutinize the necessity of an arrest, preventing the judiciary from acting as a rubber stamp for police actions. The BNSS's consification system translates the abstract protections of Article 21 into the specific mechanics of the justice system. This final matrix shows how the parameters interact. For a judge to deny bail, the state must present concrete risks, like the likelihood of absconding or tampering with evidence, that are severe enough to physically override the pillar of presumed innocence. Evaluating a non-bailable offense requires the court to look beyond the raw gravity of the crime. Judges must perform a holistic review of the accused's antecedents and the larger societal interest in a fair investigation. Through decades of jurisprudence, the highest court has maintained a consistent directive. Taking away a citizen's freedom before a guilty verdict is rendered should never become a routine procedure. When the statutory code of the BNSS interacts with binding Supreme Court precedents, we see the true mechanics of judicial discretion at work. It is a deliberate, highly regulated system designed to achieve a singular outcome, ensuring that criminal procedure functions as a tool to secure a fair trial and never degrades into an instrument of pre-trial harassment.